Greg Keyes loves research. For his Age of Unreason series, which takes place in an alternate 18th century in which Sir Isaac Newton discovers the basics of alchemy, not physics, Keyes researched everything from pre-Revolutionary War Boston to the fashions and recipes of the 18th century. In writing the Edge of Victory duology, Keyes extensively utilized the first generation of the Essential Guides, 7 books that detailed the characters, planets, technology, weapons, droids, alien species, and more of the expanded universe at that time. He also read all the previous NJO books, which is more than you can say for some of the authors. Edge of Victory Rebirth made it to number 11 on the New York Times paperback bestseller list for the week of August 26th, 2001, and was ultimately on the list for 2 weeks. I was surprised by how little I remembered of Rebirth. I remembered basically the big changes at the end, but I didn't remember what Han and Leia were doing or what Corran, Anakin, and Tahiri were doing for that matter either. So, a brief summary. With no help from the divided New Republic against the Yuuzhan Vong, the Jedi are on their own. While Han and Leia use controversial tactics to bolster Luke Skywalker's Jedi resistance, and Jaina Solo tries to bring Kyp Durron back into the fold, Corran Horn and Anakin and Tahiri uncover a Yuuzhan Vong plot against the world of Yag'Dhul. Just in Rebirth alone, we have Corran Horn, Anakin Solo, and Tahiri Vela off on a simple refueling mission that goes very, very wrong. Luke Skywalker and his wife Mara Jade dealing both with the New Republic government as well as Mara's illness and her pregnancy. Han Solo, Leia Organa Solo, and their son Jacen off on work for Luke's Great River to move Jedi to safety. Jaina Solo not being able to rejoin Rogue Squadron, so her uncle dispatches her to find out what Kyp Durron's been up to. We have the aforementioned Yuuzhan Vong plot against the planet Yag'Dhul. We have a subplot with the Shaper Nen Yim. So that's 6 main subplots, and then other stuff going on as well. Tahiri Vela is still dealing with the aftermath of the torture she suffered at the hands of the Yuuzhan Vong Shapers. She feels now that the other Jedi kids distrust her, are wary of her, and so she pretty much forces herself to go along on a routine refueling trip with Corran Horn and Anakin Solo. While on Eriadu, Anakin and Tahiri do not stay on the ship as Corran tells them. Instead, they head off in search of a Jedi who needs help against the Peace Brigade. The Jedi dies, but with his dying breath, he says one word: Yag'Dhul. So Anakin, a bit sneakily, makes sure that they make their way there, and they make their way right into the middle of a Yuuzhan Vong fleet. Their ship is destroyed. They end up commandeering a Yuuzhan Vong spy vessel. We get the first hint that what Anakin and Vua Rapun and Tahiri did on Yavin 4 has spread to other Yuuzhan Vong, particularly the Shamed Ones. And so they have a Shamed One who's perfectly willing to work with Jedi because of this mythology that's been built around their escapades on Yavin 4. There's some shenanigans where the station loses atmosphere and Anakin and Tahiri are stuck in a locker for a while and behave as you might expect teenagers to do. But ultimately, the Yuuzhan Vong are repelled at Yag'Dhul and the planet is, for now, still safe. Anakin thinks a little more about how, for better or worse, he influences the younger generation of the Jedi. Corran Horn learns that teenagers are difficult to deal with. And Anakin and Tahiri take their first steps toward some kind of relationship, although it's still in its preliminary stages at this point. Meanwhile, back on the Millennium Falcon, Han Solo, Leia, and Jacen are trying to find supporters for Luke Skywalker's Jedi resistance. They've made a temporary base within the Maw, where the former Maw installation was, but a lot of their plotline is them acting like pirates or privateers, attacking Peace Brigade ships. Jacen has some initial difficulties with the track that his father's decided they're taking, which honestly, I don't blame him for. Piracy is a little extreme, even when you're doing it against people who are very much not working in your best interests. But he comes around to their plan. And as in Balance Point, Jaina is still struggling with anger and frustration. In this case, that she hasn't been told she can rejoin Rogue Squadron. It's just not good politics for Rogue Squadron to have a Jedi pilot right now. And her Uncle Luke dispatches her to discover what Kyp Durron and his dozen are up to. Remember how in the Darktide duology by Stackpole, Admiral Treyfei went to the remains of the Cernpedal system to scout out what the Yuuzhan'Val were doing, and it very much looked like they were creating a shipyard? Well, Kyp has proof that they are constructing a super weapon that, like the Sun Crusher, could just destroy entire suns. He has video from a reconnaissance mission to back up his claims. Jaina takes this to Colonel Darklighter, who takes it to Wedge Antilles, so it is now almost a New Republic military sanctioned attack on the shipyards at Cernpedal. Kyp Durron is also really confusing to Jaina. He's constantly flirting with her. He offers that she become his apprentice because her aunt is rather busy right now, and Jaina doesn't know what to think. Of course, as it turns out, Kyp was lying. It was not a super weapon at the ship womb. It was a new world ship that would have housed civilians. And if Jaina and Colonel Darklighter and Wedge Antilles had known that, they would have never sanctioned that attack. This is part of what frustrates me so much with Kyp Durron. Luke frustrates me as well, and I'll get into that a little later. But Kyp is constantly urging action, but for most of the books thus far, his squadron hasn't been thinking very strategically. They've been attacking the Yuuzhan'Val, but it's more like flies bothering a giant beast. They're not actually accomplishing anything. It's action for the sake of action. With this threat here at the Cernpedal ship womb, it looks like he's actually accomplishing something. He's actually thinking strategically now. And if it was a super weapon, I would 100% condone what he did. You need to take something like that out because it gives the Yuuzhan'Val an unfair advantage that they don't need at this point, and that would do irrevocable harm to the people of the galaxy. But as we learn in the subplot with Nen Yim, the world ships of the Yuuzhan'Val in that house, their civilians and their shamed ones, and not just the warriors but everyone, are dying. They're thousands of years old at this point, and since they're living, their systems are just shutting down. So in destroying the world ship, Kyp Durron has essentially said that he doesn't care about civilians, he doesn't care about the women and the children, to quote Anakin from Attack of the Clones. He wants to wipe them all out. And now Jaina and anyone else who feels remorse from that mission has those potential upcoming deaths on their conscience. Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade are on Coruscant. Mara is now 8 months pregnant, so they're soon awaiting the birth of their son. They're enjoying a quiet moment of relaxation when Kenth Hamner, a Jedi who's a retired military member, comes to them and lets them know that the Chief of State, Borsk Feoya, has put out a warrant for their arrests. Borsk has been rather frustrating in the New Jedi Order thus far because he doesn't want to commit to anything. After the ultimatum that the War Master Savan Law issued at the end of Balance Point, he doesn't want to support the Jedi, he doesn't want to condemn them, but he wants to arrest Luke, or at least make it look like he tries to arrest Luke. So Mara and Luke have to escape Coruscant And at the same time, they find out that Mara's illness has returned. So Mara goes downhill really fast. She's essentially staying alive to keep her baby alive. And Luke is just very upset about what's happening with her. Doesn't really do anything until the end, until she particularly asks. And this is what I find so frustrating with Luke in the New Jedi Order, is that while Kyp's approach is too aggressive, Luke's approach is far too passive. He comes up with this plan for a great river to move the Jedi to safety, but then he doesn't do anything about it. It's all Han and Leia and Cam and Tion and the characters we'll encounter in the Emissary of the Void short story. And so what is he doing with his time other than lollygagging around, being like, I can't take action, I just have to sit this out? This is the man that destroyed the first Death Star, who is willing to turn himself in to save his father. But here in the New Jedi Order series, when the threat is galaxy-wide, he just sits there and does very little. On the Yuuzhan Vong side, we have this attempt on Yag'Dhul. The War Master sends a relative of his, Corran, to work with Nominor to take over Yag'Dhul. We learn that Nominor has got the Shapers to make himself another disguise, and this disguise makes him look like a Given. We also see the extent to which Nominor is willing to kill his own people to keep his secrets. He turns on the warriors that are accompanying him. He uses a blaster, which should be completely against his beliefs, to make sure that no one knows what happened with the Jedi there. And in a separate, other Yuuzhan Vong subplot, we have Nen Yim, the Shaper adept from Conquest, who's now been sent to one of those dying world ships. She's in disgrace, and she wants to save the world ship, but she doesn't have the knowledge base to do that, so she once again turns to heresy. I like Nen Yim, I like learning more about their culture, but I also wondered how needed her subplot was here. A lot of it is her being frustrated, her trying to work within these constraints, and it turns out to have all been a test. K-Quad, the Master Shaper, was actually Onimi, the jester of the Supreme Overlord, and he's going to make her a Master Shaper now, and she's going to be working on new things. For their biotechnology to progress and grow, she's going to be working outside of that tradition. The Edge of Victory duology is rather similar to James Luceno's Agents of Chaos duology, and that the first book is almost entirely focused on one character. In Hero's Trial, it was Han, and in Conquest, it was Anakin, while the second book in the series opens the story up to a lot more characters and a lot more subplots. However, I felt like most of the subplots were important, were needed, other than perhaps Nen Yim's subplot. I felt like these were essential. So rather than my usual criticism, which is that I think more editing needed to be done, I think that Rebirth almost has the opposite problem. The paperback is only 292 pages. It's even shorter than Conquest was. And I just wish that it had been further expanded and some of the subplots had been given more breathing space. For instance, in Han and Leia and Jacen's subplot, they're constantly working to harry the Peace Brigade, steal their cargoes, and try to find a new safe world for the Jedi. But in the end, we're found that a safe world was found by Cam Solusar and his wife Tion, who never even appeared in these pages. Which made me wonder why Cam and Tion didn't get a subplot of their own, or why they couldn't have been incorporated into Han and Leia, since Han and Leia were working along that same tract. Likewise, I would have liked to see a little bit more of the Yuuzhan Vong strategy in regards to Yag'Dhul. It's kept a secret for so long what planet they're even attacking, and then we find out it's Yag'Dhul, and it's like, I guess that would be a good staging point for Thyphera, but we're not actually told that. It's just conjecture on the part of other characters. So that was another aspect of the plot that I really felt could have been expanded upon even more. And perhaps as a related problem to just the short size of this book was that some of the conclusions felt like Deus ex machinas, that they just came out of nowhere, and I didn't see how that related to what came before. In regards to Mara's illness, we're first introduced to her illness in Vector Prime. We see what an effect it's having on her and the Dark Tide duology. And then in Agents of Chaos Heroes Trial, she's given a cure. And they say it's temporary, but it seems like a pretty good cure. And when we encounter her again in Balance Point, she's healthy, she's thriving, she's now expecting a child. She's fine through 8 months of her pregnancy, and then sort of out of nowhere, perhaps because she's no longer taking the original tears, she's taking a synthetic now, that cure doesn't work and is actively harmful. It's built up these toxins in her body, and she can't take it anymore. So her illness comes back. It's worse than before. She's almost dead. And near the end, she calls for Luke. She lets him in with the Force. He sees a potential vision of what their son could accomplish and could be. They all three of them, Mara, Luke, and their baby, join together in the Force. All the Solo kids get a sense that something's wrong with their aunt, and Anakin in particular is frantic to find out if she's okay. And we're told by Mirax Tarek that she's okay now, she's completely cured and healed. And I know this is the Force, so they don't have to explain everything. But I would like some explanation here. I guess Luke and Mara and the baby all joining together just, wiped her illness out. But the whole point of her illness was because it was from the Yuuzhan Vong. It, can't be sensed in the Force and is changing how her body works, and the fact that she's cured and it just comes out of nowhere and we don't even really see it other than one sentence at the end of the chapter is so frustrating to me. It's like the New Jedi Order series couldn't decide whether they wanted to have Mara ill or they didn't want to have Mara ill, and when she was ill she was sort of sidelined from the narrative. So then she's not ill, but then it comes back because dramatic tension. But now she's completely cured, and I'm not sure I ever wanted her to be ill to begin with, but I'd rather that there were consequences for things than that she be miraculously, inexplicably healed, and we're never going to talk about that going forward. Likewise, the subplot with Leia and Han and Jacen, they receive this intelligence, they go there, it's a trap. It's really bad, and then there's sort of this dodgy science explaining how they escape, and it involves hydrogen, manipulating Dovin basiles because they're like black holes. And it felt a lot like the science at the end of Vector Prime, where something happens and I go, does it work like that? And Han explains it, and then Jacen goes, yeah, I get it too. And they explain it to Leia, who I guess is the reader here who doesn't know what just happened. But I'm like, was that really the best way to end this? So, in short, Edge of Victory Rebirth introduces some concepts that will have greater play in the books to follow, particularly the Jedi heresy among the Shamed Ones, Nen Yim's shaping discoveries, and most critically, the birth of Luke and Mara's son, Ben Skywalker. It just felt a little messy, and I really wish this book was longer and been given a bit more time to expand on some ideas and to flesh out some of the plot lines a little more. So, next time I will be reading another story by Greg Keyes, this time a 6-part serial that appeared in both the Star Wars Gamer and the Star Wars Insider magazines, Emissary of the Void.